looking for something to fill the hole, that God-sized hole in all of us that only gets filled by God. But you try it. You try with sex, you try with drugs, you try with rock and roll, you try all of these things. You try to fill that hole, and nothing is satisfactory. Nothing satisfies. My dad was an alcoholic. He was quite functioning. He was very A-type personality, so you could set your watch for the time of day that he did everything. And he was never late. He was always on time, but he came home every night and got drunk every night. And he had issues managing his emotions. He actually drank in the garage. When we were in Santa Monica, he would go out into the garage, watch TV. He had a little fridge out there, and he would drink in the garage and then come in for dinner, go back out, watch his news, drink his beer, and then go to bed. He was like, I'm telling you, clockwork. You could set your watch for the time of day you went to the bathroom. My sister was dating this guy, and this just speaks a lot to like my personality, is that I would go up and give him a kiss, and I would trade him a kiss for a sip of his beer. And I was 6. So I didn't really like the taste of beer, but I liked what it did to me, right? I liked the effect. So, I was one of those kids who was always going really high on the swing, going really fast on the merry-go-round. I was always looking for something to alter my state, my mental state. Sisters and brothers are going through like acid, and, they're doing stuff, and we're seeing all this stuff in the house. One time when my brother came in, and I don't know what was going on with him, but he was not happy, and he came home and asked what was for dinner and didn't like the answer, and took and flipped. My mom had a pie sitting on the counter, flipped the pie up, and I don't remember all of it. I just remember being really scared. I was probably 6 or 7, and him pulling a knife and kind of threatening my mom with the knife, and my sister Carolyn, the oldest, stepping in and grabbing the knife, and it almost cut her finger off. And my mom taking her apron and wrapping it up and getting in the car and going to the hospital. So that was the kind of stuff that was going on in my house. It really started in earnest in the seventh grade. Before that, it was like opportunistic. I would go around and empty the drinks when they would have gatherings and stuff, and steal sips of beer. But it was not anything until like the middle of 7th grade. My friend Becky's mom had her when she was 15. And so she was the cool mom, right? And Becky's mom's new husband, which is why they had moved to Alaska, his name was Clark, and he was a pothead. So we were like sneaking in. He was the wiser. Trust me, he knew we were stealing his pot, and smoking pot all day while she was at work. And then we found some boys, and we started hooking up with these boys, and just trying to get in trouble. And so she's like, hey, there's this really cute guy, and it's a head shop. Come down and hang out, So we came down and hung out there. So that's where I met husband number 1. Mike was 25 and I was 14. Anyway, I said, we want to get married. So she signed the thing to get married because she didn't want me living in sin. They basically denied us. So we reapplied through LA County, and by that time I was already pregnant. So they're like, what are they going to do? Somebody wants to take responsibility, so they approved. So we got married, and it was in February, so it was a year from our first date to the time I was married, and I was 5.5 months pregnant when we got married. My mother was very pragmatic. She was like, okay, well, this sucks, and I don't approve of it, but what are you going to do? It's a reality now, so let's deal with it. Our relationship lasted about 2 years. Literally, I was divorced before I was 18. Michael and I, Lonnie Kai's dad. I managed to stay clean and sober except for cigarettes the whole time I was pregnant. I didn't do any drugs, barely drank. But when she was 6 weeks old, it was 4th of July. So I drank basically all day long. Then we went over to another friend's house, the guy who was the best man at our wedding, and we continued drinking. I passed out. Well, Lonnie Kai's still breastfeeding. That's all she's doing. So Mike's like, so he basically put her on me, and she slept through the night for the first time. So the first time that's our joke, the first time she was drunk, she was 6 weeks old. I don't get the Mother of the Year award. By the time I was 17, our marriage was like on the rocks. And let me tell you, I was never faithful to anybody except the last guy who I dated. It's the only guy I never cheated on. I was the queen of multiple dating. And so I met somebody and started dating him and, sleeping with him. And so Mike and I went our separate ways. And then I continued partying and drinking and, hanging out at the bars. I was drinking at bars way before I was 21. I had a fake ID. It said I was 10 years older than I was. Anyway, I met this guy and ended up getting pregnant by him and was convinced by him that the only reasonable choice was an abortion. So that was, if I had had the slightest bit of encouragement from him to keep it, I would have kept it. Him as a boy. And there was some weird thing going on in LA County. So the guy who owned the clinic, it was another trauma. The guy who owned the clinic, there was something about him. He was all over the news about like not having proper disposal for the waste. And it was just like, just another trauma. And then, I know I was getting pretty in deep with cocaine and with my dealers, and I was getting fronted. And then when you're a drug addict, you buy it and then you start selling it so you can afford to do it because you're doing your product, and then you're doing your product, your profit plus, and then you get in the hole, and that's what happened with me. And I ended up just getting into this deep, dark hole where I didn't see a way out, and took a handful of, with my daughter in the room with me, in the bedroom with me, and took a handful of Quaaludes and a couple of glasses of wine, and the boyfriend, Richard, came and found me. I had my stomach pumped. And anyway, I attempted suicide, came back, lived with my parents. My brother Mark, the one that was violent and all that stuff, he had met Jesus at 17 and went from carrying a beer to carrying a Bible. So he was all part of that Jesus movement with Calvary Chapel, and Chuck Smith and all that stuff. And then following him were my brother Lonnie and my sister Charlene. So they all became born-again Christians. And my brother Mark was playing in a Christian band. My brother Lonnie was writing and singing Christian music. And Charlene was writing the lyrics, and Lonnie was writing the music. So he took me to a Christian concert. Now, I don't know how much you know about the contemporary Christian music scene in that day, but Keith Green, second chapter of Acts, and Barry Maguire. So I think it was at the Anaheim Convention Center or whatever, Anaheim Stadium. 1979, July maybe, 1979. And we had the cheap seats, like nosebleed section up here. And I remember watching Annie Herring, who was the second chapter of Acts. It was two sisters and a brother. Literally having a relationship with Jesus. And being Catholic, I wasn't raised. The relationship thing was missing. The gospel is there, but I didn't see it. I didn't pick it up. It was like, do this, don't do that. I saw a lot of hypocrisy in my family, like we're a certain way on Sunday, all of these things that, you can call it church hurt or whatever, but I went the opposite direction. And I was mad at God, but I claimed to be an atheist, which is, kind of stupid. Can't be mad at somebody you don't believe in, right? But I just thought, anyway, but slowly things had been happening, different things. I'm not going to go into details, but to bring me closer to, maybe there is something bigger than me. Maybe there is, getting outside of myself enough to be able to even be open to it. And God used some pretty strange things. This thing called actualizations, which was like, hippy-dippy, trippy, something you'd call a cult, really. from a Christian point of view, you might call it a cult. And that's what my family thought. But God used it to open my mind to this thing, to, more. So he brought me to this concert, and I witnessed people having a relationship with Jesus. And I felt the Holy Spirit, and I did the altar call. I bawled, just lost it, to the point where I almost tripped going down, because it was way up here, way down. I can't see anything. And I did the altar call, and that's when I moved from, you can believe that a fire burns, but until you experience the fire burning you and you feel it on your hand, you don't know that it burns. You're just believing that it burns, right? And so I went from any kind of tentative belief to knowing. Then I went right back into the world. And you know the parable about the sower? And I was the weed. So the weed with the sin of the world comes up and tears you down. So for the next 35 years, it's a very difficult state to be in. It's actually easier to be in the state where you don't believe anything than to be in the state where you know and you ignore. I don't know if that makes sense, but I knew it was fact, but I wasn't being obedient. So I knew it was just like, okay, so I had God on hold, basically. It's like, later. I'm having fun right now. Later. So still drinking. I went right back to drinking. I would go back up to Santa Monica on weekends and, do cocaine, sleep with my ex-boyfriend or boyfriend, whatever. We were still having a relationship, kind of. This whole time I was going to church. I was being a complete hypocrite, basically. But it was dripping into my life. Eventually, I got a DUI. Looking back at all this stuff, every job I've ever lost was because of misbehavior around drugs and alcohol. So, and I've lost a few jobs. Went back to school to learn how to do nails. Two gals came in for pedicures. And I'm looking at their feet, and I'm like, one of them has like big calluses on the pads of her feet, and the other one, her toes are all like jammed, and I'm like, what are you guys doing to your feet? This is awful. This is horrible. And they were like early 20s, young. My age, because that's about how old I was. They were my age. And they told me they were strippers. And they told me how much money they made. And I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. So I went down an audition and got the gig. That was like all nude. So people between 18 and 21, you could do all nude because they didn't serve alcohol. So a lot of those girls were between 18 and 21. And then they would go, once they hit 21, they'd go to someplace else that was a strip joint that served alcohol, because you can make a lot more money with alcohol, right? And once I figured all that out, I went to a place called Pacers. That's where I met husband number 2. He was a patron of Pacers. And wow, do I know how to pick him, right? And where to shop for him. He was still married to another gal who was a stripper who used to work at Pacers. She worked down the street at a place called AJ's. At any rate, eventually I ended up getting fired from Pacers for being drunk on the job, and then going down and working at AJ's, and met her. Her stage name was Mary Lee, and I met her, but I didn't tell her I was dating her ex-husband. So I eventually told her, but literally they got divorced. It was like one of those quickie Caribbean divorces where you send it away, whatever. They got divorced literally 2 weeks before our wedding. And then her and I became really good friends. So we became really good friends actually before she knew I was marrying her ex-husband. And but we actually ended up becoming roommates at one point. So it's a very interesting Oprah-esque story, I guess. Jerry Springer, I don't know. Not enough fighting for Jerry Springer. I ended up getting pregnant again with my oldest son. And I had a second son. They're 16 months apart. Shane and Cameron. And Bill was an alcoholic. I was more of a drug addict. A lot of that time I'm working and I'm on welfare and I'm dealing drugs because, you can't live on welfare.
So you're still dealing drugs.
Still dealing drugs.
Well, full time.
Yes, but now it's methamphetamine. So San Diego is the meth capital of, at that time, was the meth capital of the world. It was all the Hells Angels and stuff were cooking it back then. So all of my kids' childhood, I was doing drugs and dealing. I was at in Alcoholics Anonymous, we call it the jumping off place. Go on to the bitter end, or pick up the set of spiritual tools that Alcoholics Anonymous lays at your feet. So it's basically like, I'm either going to get sober or I'm going to die. I'm going to commit suicide. Again, I'm in that spot. Let me tell you something about my sister. She is tenacious. That girl, she grabs a hold of something, she don't let go. She shakes and shakes and shakes. So I wouldn't let her in. The door was locked. I wouldn't let her in. And she'd beat on the door, and she'd beat on the window, and she'd beat on the door, and she said, beat on the window, and said, I'm not leaving until you let me in. So I let her in. And then she basically talked me into going to rehab. I've been sober ever since. I just celebrated 18 years sober. So once I got sober, I'm listening to sermons, and I'm listening to all their archive sermons. And there's this thread that runs through every single message, and it's one word, and that word's obedience. And I wasn't doing it. So I'm like, and what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So the relationship wasn't working because I wasn't doing it God's way. And so at that point, I just had this like, okay. So I broke up with him. Or actually, I told him I wasn't going to sleep with him anymore. And he said, well, then what do I need a girlfriend for? Basically. And I'm like, really? So for how many years? It was like 8 years we've been doing this thing, and that's what it was all about. It was just that. I was like, okay, how stupid am I, right? So I started going back to church and actually, getting into the Word, looking for love and looking for something to fill the hole, that God-sized hole in all of us that only gets filled by God. But you try it. You try with sex. You try with drugs. You try with rock and roll. You try all of these things. You try to fill that hole. And nothing is satisfactory. Nothing satisfies. And so, life is lifey this year. But I'm so grateful that I don't know how people without Jesus do this. I just don't. Without a faith community, I don't know how they do it. Between my faith community and my AA community and just all the other friends, they have been remarkable at showing up in my life and like, what do you need? What do you need? So, and being very supportive. I don't know. I'm so grateful. And without sobriety, I wouldn't be able to be here for my family. I wouldn't be, like I said, least likely to be the person who is taking care of everybody else. Yeah. My worst day sober is better than my best day loaded. So it doesn't matter what's happened here. My worst day sober is better than my best day loaded because I wasn't there. I wasn't fully there, right? I'm present now. I can be present. I can be here for the people who need me. I can be the mom, the mom, the nana that I should be. I can be present, living my life and experiencing things. People who numb themselves, whether it's with drugs, alcohol, whatever they're using to numb themselves, shopping, you're numb. You're not experiencing life. Love is the answer. What's the question? It doesn't matter what the question is. The answer is God, always.